what we think the pattern should be around the straight party vote line, you find out about 20,000 votes were taken from Trump and 20,000 votes were given to Biden for a 40,000 Biden lead in the Oakland early voting, okay? Just one county. So that's what you see here. Now, more importantly, if you notice, I've drawn these orange lines. So what you notice is this phenomenon, if you actually look below 20%, Trump was actually getting more votes than Republican candidates, right? All the way up to 20%, you see he was getting close to 7% more votes than his other Republican counterparts. But for some reason, which we'll talk about, right at 20%, it looks like his vote counts start getting linearly reduced. This is too structured, right? Too perfect.
Yeah.
What is that, Benny?
Too perfect.
Too perfect. Okay. In AI, you look for features like these because it lets you build an algorithm, right? This is easy. So this beautiful curve hits flat and boom, it drops in a nice linear fashion, as though an algorithm was there. As you went across, votes were getting cut by Trump. And that's what we see here. And remember, we've talked about it. The election systems, going back to Diebold, right, Benny? They have the feature of being able to manipulate vote counts from one person to another. It's called the weighted race feature. So you see it here. Now, is it only in Oakland County in early voting? Well, let's look here. Here's election day voting. Right, Phil, this is election day we're looking at. And you see the same thing. Election day, there's around 20,000 votes, 10,000, Trump's votes are reduced by 10,000 and Biden's votes were increased by 10,000 here. But look at this pattern, same thing, it's around 7% and boom, okay? Slope looks pretty damn close, doesn't it, Phil, Benny?
Yep.
Looks very, very close, okay? The reason this is important is this is in one time period. So that's Oakland County. Now let's look at a different county. Again, spatially, we're going to a different place and a different time, early voting, Macomb County. Here there were 28,000 votes. 14,000 were taken from Trump, 14,000 were given to Biden. And what do you see here? Well, in this case, Trump actually does even better. He's almost at, what does that look like? About 12%, Benny? 12%?
12%.
And then here, this kicks in around at 25%.
Yeah.
Okay, but same sort of slope. Okay, so they start eating Trump's votes at this point, but he's doing better in these counties by 12% more than the Republican Party candidates. Okay, he's doing better. Now let's go over here to Macomb County on election day. Okay, same feature you see. In fact, he's doing really good here, up to 22%. Right, Phil? That's what that looks like.
22.
Right, in the election day voting. All right, and then again it drops precipitously when right around here. Okay, but same feature, same algorithm is in place. Now we look at again the same thing here. So total, when you look at Macomb County, a total of 16,500 votes were taken away from Trump. By the way, these are minimum, and 16,500 votes were given to Biden. So a total of 33,000. Trump votes moving to Biden. The second thing is that as precincts increase with a higher percentage of Republicans, greater percentage of Trump votes are transferred to Biden. So you would think, wow, more people are Republicans in this precinct. You would think Trump would do better. In fact, it seems like going to Republican precincts was his worst nightmare. You lose more. He lost higher percentage of votes, the more Republican precincts they were. Another way to think about this is the more the precinct was Republican, the more percent of Trump votes are transferred to Biden in that precinct. I'll repeat that. The more the precinct was Republican, the more the percent of Trump votes are transferred to Biden. And by case in point, let's just go look back here at Kent County, this very dramatic graph here. So very Republican. This is almost like 90% Republican. Trump got nearly 25% votes lost there, e.g. transferred to Biden. Okay, that's what we're looking at here. So this is just looking at the data. So the slope of the discount to Trump's votes is the same for each county. That's what's more interesting. What do I mean by that? What is the slope? Again, people, if you have forgotten algebra, right? And by and large, the slope is pretty much the same. Okay, so the slope of that line looks very similar. And that's what we wanted to make here. The slope of the discount to Trump's votes is reasonably, quote unquote, I should put the same for each county. So what's the discussion? So those are the results. Let's have a discussion here. So The algorithm, we believe, is a weighted race allocation method. It's a transfer of a percent of votes from one candidate to another, the weighted race method. And one of the things is the weighted race, as we mentioned at the outset, is a documented feature in election systems as early as 2001. Another question is it possible that this pattern is normal and explains a normal voting pattern? What do we mean by this pattern? We're talking about that line going, just to be clear, we're talking about that line going across and then coming down at a certain point, that pattern, line going across and coming down. So is it possible that's just normal? Well, that just happens. This is not no algorithm, you guys are trying to say, but is it possible that's normal? For example, Mitt Romney would say, and he has said this, the pattern makes sense. He would say, look, since Republicans stayed Republican, but no longer like Trump, this could be true, right? This could be true. Well, if that were true, what would you see? You would see this.
Right.
You would see all these precincts deviating from the norm, at some distribution like this. All right. But that's not what we see, right? But that's not what we see. What we see is a predictable line, a decline of dislike for Trump with increasing percentage of Republican precincts. We actually see this. We don't see this. If Mitt Romney was right, you would see this. Or if any rational person would write, oh yeah, Trump just pissed off a lot of Republicans everywhere. Well, across all precincts, you'd see this everywhere. But what we see is this. In fact, we see a beautiful line, which you could go back to your Algebra 1 class and write an equation for, y equals mx plus b, and I could draw that line. I could calculate it precisely. So precisely, I could put it into a computer program. That's how precisely I could do this. And I'm sure we could do this in any function, probably in 5-10 minutes. We haven't gotten there yet. So given that this predictable linear decline of dislike increases, it makes no sense, right? This makes no sense unless a computer algorithm was in place to lower Trump's votes as a function of percentage of Republicans in a precinct. In this case, linearly, okay? That curve, boom, it goes down beautifully linear. So let me just bring that back to everyone, and I'll ask Phil and Benny if you want to add, and we still have some other stuff to finish, but what we're saying is that beautiful point where it's nice and flat, Trump's actually doing well in non-Republican precincts, and then it's like a switch gets turned on and it goes down linearly. Our position is that could only be done by a computer algorithm in such a precise way over so many precincts, okay? It's not like, because over so many precincts, you'd see some random fluctuations. You don't. You see a nice little line going there. What is the chance that that pattern, let me go back here, the pattern that we're talking about is just not a computer algorithm? That was a question Phil asked you, Benny.
Yeah, I rarely would say 0%, so I maybe say 1%. If you get in trouble if you don't leave a little room for error, then that number would just grow further in the size, and that line and that slope would continue to go down. And that is literally the presence of something that is not it's barely germane to something that's natural. It's something that's artificial.
Right. So that's the bottom line here. So the bottom line is this is the probability of this from any mathematical description, you would call it, I'm just going forward again, is unlikely.